Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another incredible episode of Sold. It is so nice to have everybody here tonight. How have you all been? How was your week?
Awesome.
Wonderful.
Great.
Let's go back to the beach.
You went to the beach?
Yeah, just go back to the beach. So good. Just resets the day.
I'm happy to hear that. Does that mean things are reopening?
Nope, but the beach is open, which is really cool. Outside, fresh air. Yeah.
That's all you need.
It's amazing.
Hey, God.
Always be open.
Huh?
God's world should always be open. I can't close the beach.
Completely agree, Adina. Anyway, so our topic for tonight, first of all, let me introduce myself again for those of you who are joining us for the first time tonight, or for those of you who are not joining us for the first time tonight. Welcome to all of you. I'm happy that you are back with us again. And my name is Yafa Palti, and I will be your host for this evening. Together with me, I have my two dear friends. We have Jackie and Adina. You could say hi, introduce yourselves.
Hi, guys.
Hi, everybody.
So for tonight's
episode.
What?
Is this not officially our last episode with our audience? I'm pretty sure.
Well, this is our last episode of season 1.
Yeah.
Who's optimistic?
There's a season 2 in the mix.
Fantastic. So this is our last episode of season 1. It has been a fantastic season. And it was really an honor to share it with my fellow hosts and with all of you lovely women who have been watching and participating along with us. So thank you very much for a fantastic first season. And so let's jump right in. Our topic for tonight. Tonight we are talking about intimacy. Did you say how everybody just woke up? Everybody woke up. Why is that, by the way? Why does everybody wake up when they hear about the topic of intimacy and sexuality? If we would have just said, okay, guys, today we're talking about shoes, a few people would have been very excited. It would have been we're talking about books, a few people, food, maybe half the people. But tonight we're talking about sex, and everybody's like, oh, I'm here. I wonder why this topic is such a hot topic. Do any of you know why this is something that is just so attractive to people, that it's kind of it's just an attractive. It's a hot topic.
Yeah,
do you know why? Why more than some of the other things?
Yeah, we're obsessed with it. I think we're obsessed with it. We're programmed to yearn for it and to want it and to yearn deeply for that real connection. And then there's all the different experiences along the way of trying to get that genuine, real, authentic connection. And I think that the whole world is obsessed with it. If you look at all the songs, we've talked about this in the past, all the songs and a lot of the social, the media that's out there, we're obsessed with love. We're obsessed with the feeling of the connection, of the intimate connection at all the different levels, right? And we've gotten, I think, a bit more overt about how we express that in this latest generation. But essentially, it's the same drive. I think it's the yearning for connection in the deepest possible way, and to be known, and to know others, and to be known.
I agree with you. I really think that's probably the driving force behind it. It's this deep desire for connection, and this is really the ultimate connection, because I think that in order to connect with somebody, you need to have a level of vulnerability expressed. And the ultimate vulnerability is when you are completely vulnerable, emotionally as well as physically. And I think that this is the deepest possible level of connection that people can have. And maybe this is why it has become such an obsession and something that is such a hot topic. But I think also with that,
it's not just because we are obsessed with that, we're yearning for something deeper. We're not getting it. That's the point. You're yearning for something, and then you're not actually getting it. It's like eating junk food over and over and over again, but never being satisfied, which we talked about in a previous episode. It's really important to realize that I think what we're seeing in today's world, that people are just yearning for something, they're consuming it, never being satisfied, and we're addicted to it. And that addiction, we always have to up the ante. And it's a sad notion because there's so much pleasure out there and there's so much to be had in terms of feeling complete, but yet we're not attaining it. And
I think also like mistaking the sexual act and the intimacy physically for love. Like I think that's a big issue, that we keep chasing after the physical in the hope that it's going to lead to love, and maybe in sort of jumping into that level too quickly, there's a throwing away or a sacrificing of the deeper. I don't know. I'm just like, so.
I think that, I'm sorry. I thought you were done. Continue.
I'm done. I could talk forever. I could just, you like just jumping.
It's a problem. It's really a problem that we're all educators, by the way. If everybody out there would only know how hard we work to stop talking and let the other person talk, they would appreciate us a little bit more. Anyway, so I agree with what you're saying, and I understand. I think it makes a lot of sense. I'm thinking that there's a big misunderstanding in general about what intimacy is, and I think that people, as you said, people do mistake in love or even emotional intimacy for physical intimacy, and try to kind of fill up on that. Like Adina said, I like their analogy with the junk food, right? You try to fill up, but you're never satisfied like that. And I think that, we know that there are these concept and theories, and maybe in other religions, whatever they are, where and other cultures that really do believe that intimacy, and specifically physical intimacy, is something sinful and evil and actually inherently bad. And that carries over into modern society. So it has become something known as like naughty and dirty and wrong, and therefore exciting, because look at me, I'm being naughty and I'm being dirty, and doing something wrong. Or and sometimes it's the opposite way. It turns, where you rebel against the concept of, this is a sin, and you rebel by being promiscuous and, do something wrong. Wow. Kind of the opposite extreme. And of course, this carried on to us as well in Judaism, because sometimes there is ignorance that doesn't allow us to distinguish between religions. And if there's, let's say, in one specific religion, sex and intimacy is known as something inherently bad, then, in religion it's known as bad. But in Judaism, it's not at all. It's the opposite. According to Judaism, intimacy is actually the holy of holies. It is one of the holiest things we can possibly do. It's one of the holiest states we can be in. And what's my proof of this? Right? Is everybody out there familiar with the temple? Right? So we know that the Jewish people, we had a temple that was destroyed, and our part of our mission in this world is to rebuild the temple. And in that temple, in the holiest places, in the structure that holds the 10 Commandments, what we call in Hebrew the Aron, there were two angels on top of that structure, on top of that box. And one was male and one was female. And when the temple was destroyed, the male and female angels actually hugged each other. And this is a symbolic of a real intimate moment, right? And actually the Babylonians at the time mocked us for it. The Babylonians said, at the time of the destruction of the temple, they said that they made fun of us. They were like, this is what they're celebrating. This is what they're holding up over there. That we have promiscuity in our temple. Because the thing is that they didn't understand that this was holiness. They saw it as something perverted. And by us, it's holiness. It was like the holiest moment. So based on that, I would love to ask you a question. Let's see how we could understand this a little bit more. Obviously, there are misunderstandings because we just explained Judaism's perspective of it, but there really are a lot of misunderstandings. Even the way it's portrayed sometimes, or different movies that people might watch, different things people see that might portray an image of intimacy that really isn't based on Judaism. So there's confusion. There's a lot of discomfort associated with this subject as well. So I would love to throw that question out at you and see, maybe why. What do you think is Judaism? I shared what I think is Judaism's perspective of this. I would love to hear your opinion on this. And also based on some of the confusion that we see, people might think that intimacy is very cold in Judaism. There's this concept of arranged marriages. We're not going to get into now, but if you have an arranged marriage, does that mean that there's no sexual attraction? Does that mean there's no passion? Does that mean there's no love in your intimacy? So what do any of you have anything to say on this?
Yes, I have a lot to say, but Adina, you want to go?
No, right. Jackie, I'm listening.
No? Firstly, I just want to say you do not have to be in an arranged marriage from the Jewish perspective. So it's really important to say that for all the people watching who do not know that. We're not going to get into all of that in depth, but it's definitely, you absolutely choose your life partner. I think it's really important just to mention that. And having grown up completely not observant or connected to anything Jewish until I was 30 years old. So I was so curious about this, obviously coming in as having a completely non-religious and non-observant background, what the Jewish perspective on this was, intimacy and sex. And what was so beautiful to me coming in from that perspective, as like when Rafa mentioned, it's like the holiest moment, is that it's a spiritual experience. Like it's literally the most spiritual, beautiful, deep, like sort of the thing I think subconsciously we've all yearning for. That's really what it is meant to be. And when I looked into it, like why, like, well, what's that about? Like, how does that actually work? So what I learned was that it's meant to be the deepest connection of obviously oneness between two people that you can possibly get in the world, which is the dissolving of the boundaries that happen in the moment of intimacy, right? Where there's a complete oneness on all levels, from spiritual, the soul level, the psychological level, the emotional level, and the physical level. And the physical just becomes the expression, which I'm sure we're going to get into, of all those levels. But in that oneness is a reflection of the oneness of a spiritual higher power. And that on some level where we even get closer to a godliness or a spiritual experience, a spiritual feeling as we move beyond our own limited boundaries, and we experience that oneness with this person that we put our trust and safety and faith in as a couple. And I don't know, that was like just really beautiful to me, and I just feel that everyone yearns for that. And there's what I see is there's such a lack of safety out there. There's such a lack of safety that I don't know how possible it is. And what I value about Judaism is that Judaism provides the vehicle within which to set up the right parameters to have this kind of union and spiritual experience and connection, which is so amazing and intense and beautiful and blissful. And I'm a newlywed, so I'm allowed to say that. But I've only been married like a year and a half. But I'm not speaking from like decades of experience like these guys. But I will say, having grown up with zero background in Judaism and coming to it later in life, and then now being newly married, I hope my husband forgives me. Love you. It is the most like special, beautiful, whatever. Because I've come from both sides, right? I've experienced both sides. So I just want to put that out there as the newbie on the block.
I love that, Jackie. And do you mind if I ask you something personal? And you can, if you don't want to answer it.
Just my mind, so I've got to be careful. I'm going to be on filter mode.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So this is, this is not about him, though. This is just kind of like from your perspective. Yeah. Okay. So I'm wondering, because I know that some people might be thinking, how, if you are not, intimacy, obviously we're realizing now that it's something so important in Judaism. We're seeing that it's actually something holy. It's actually something so beautiful and so special. But yet, according to Judaism, man and woman don't touch and aren't together until after they get married. So people might be concerned, what about compatibility? Right? How do you know you can marry someone if you've never been with them before? So I would like to ask you, obviously, maybe Adina, if you want to add something, and also, but I just want to piggyback on what Jackie was saying about two perspectives from going from one world of hers to another world of hers. I would love to hear what you think about that.
The physical is so like not superficial, but the expression of all the other levels, that it's just the expression. It's the vehicle of the expression of the connection on all those other levels of the spiritual and the mental and the emotional and then the physical. So if you have good communication and you really love each other and respect each other, what does compatibility mean? Right. What does that mean? That means I know the top techniques because I've read some articles, or I've practiced a lot with lots of different people. Like, what does that mean, compatibility? Like, what about communication? Like, honey, this is what I like. What do you like? You know, like just talking and feeling that deep safety and connection. So then that's totally, you know, and it's interesting because when I was practicing as a psychologist, and I was also a new psychologist in my early 20s, I got asked to join this practice with this top psychologist, and she happened to be a sex therapist as well as a couples therapist and a corporate psychologist. And so I looked up to her a lot professionally, and she told me that she could ask a couple how their intimacy pattern works, who initiates what and what happens, and like in the privacy of therapy, she would ask them, what does a typical like night of intimacy look like? And they would explain it to her because they're coming to her for advice and help and support. She could tell within 2-3 minutes of them describing the pattern of physical intimacy what the whole of their relationship was like, from the psychological, the emotional, everything. Like, you could tell the whole pattern of all the layers. She said it was just such a shortcut for her to diagnose what was going on based on physically how they came together and who did what. And I was like amazed, right? Because why? She said she wasn't Jewish. I mean, she just said the physical is just the expression of all those other levels. So it just sort of reinforced what we're talking about, you know.
That is so beautiful, and it's true because people do tend to think that that intimacy is about the bedroom, and the bedroom is the culmination of the rest of the day, of the rest of the life, of the rest of the relationship.
Exactly.
Right. There's like verbal interaction, which is really the prerequisite to anything that's going to happen physically, and the respect and the love that the couple has with each other. So we were just told that there's a comment. Is there a comment that we want to read? Where'd it go?
There we go.
Oh, could everybody see this comment?
Yeah.
Seen, I can't.
Okay.
Even hug each other. This is a huge issue because then people do not learn how to translate intimacy into their own life. It's so interesting that she's making a comment on our lack of education. And you know, Erin, I'm happy that you brought that up because it's not just a lack of education; it's an abundance of education. So not only are we lacking education in terms of healthy sexual intimacy, we're also unfortunately inundated with the wrong messages in the street. So it's going to naturally impact our notion of our own personal sexuality. And it's such a shame because, you know, that's why it's so beautiful to have a live and real session where we can possibly set the record straight and give some education. But I implore every single person who's tuning in now to let this be a springboard that you can continue learning and growing in this particular area, because there's no way that we can truly cover everything. It's such a profound subject in 45 minutes, you know, together with you. But Yafa, you mentioned something really interesting. You're like, you know, about the practice of no touching before marriage and how it plays a role. The first time we ever see any type of sexual activity grace, you know, biblical history is with Adam and Eve. And it says, Vahayu lebasar echad, they should become like one flesh. It's really interesting because like flesh is a pretty physical word, right? Jackie, you said it's such a spiritual experience. For the first time it comes on the scene, it's like basar echad. It doesn't like say, you know, one soul, one heart, one, you know, it says one flesh, literally because they started off as one flesh and they were separated. And then God charged them with this challenge. Now can you come back together? But what was the great blockage that was in their way that they now have to overcome? And most often it really has to do with the fact it naturally we want to come together in a selfish way, what feels good to us. And I think what we do see in today's culture is a great divide or an imbalanced experience between the genders, where women experience sexuality in our culture and men experience sexuality in our culture. It's very, very, very different. Think about how many men, you know, according to the Relationships in America data, reveal that 43% of men And 9% of women will have watched pornography in the past week. And that's a very, very, it's a very big divide between the genders. We obviously relate very differently to this subject. The prostitution industry is also quite skewed, where you'll see that primarily it is one gender catering towards the other gender. From a personal perspective, like between me, you, and whoever's watching now, what brought me into Judaism was to see specifically how Judaism sets up a safety net, not just for men and women, but specifically gearing towards women, knowing that they're vulnerable gender in this, where they will be the ones that are taken advantage of. That's where the Ksuba, which is the first women's rights document, in my opinion, in history, was really, brought to light in halacha. And it's beautiful to think that, like, that oneness, it allows women to be able to taste that oneness despite whatever culture in which they live. It says, no, we will set up a system that you can taste this oneness as well, because it is your right, it's your honor, it's your opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Meaning, like, what do you mean the Ketubah is the first women's rights document?
I'll tell you what I mean about that. Think about it this way.
And what's the Ketubah?
Okay, so juxtapose.
Find the Ketubah.
You don't have to juxtapose like that oneness with Adam and Eve at the beginning of time, and they were commanded with this oneness. How do we maintain that? So the Ketubah is the marriage document that's signed underneath the chuppah, the marriage canopy. It's signed by the man. And it's written in a very detailed way to ensure that the man will take responsibility for the woman's physical needs, emotional needs, and sexual needs. It's a fascinating subject, and I'll explain to you why. This is not going to sound very good, but you have to follow me through. If anybody just signed on this second, don't get off until I finish this thought. Promise, everybody. What happens underneath the chuppah, essentially? What happens? What do you actually need for a Jewish marriage? You don't even need the rabbi. Shh, don't tell anybody. All you need is the man, the woman, witnesses, in a document. Obviously, any legal document, you're going to need witnesses, right? Jackie, Yafa, any legal document, you need witnesses. What does it say in this document? It says that he has to make sure that she's going to be taken care of. He's responsible for her. But then there's a small thing that happens. He gives her a ring, right? And now it looks beautiful, but in Jewish law, do you know what it is? He's quote unquote purchasing her. And you'll say, Jackie's like, why is she telling everybody this? It's not that he's purchasing her because now she belongs to him, because we know in Jewish law, he has no rights to do anything with her. If he purchases a belonging, he can sell the belonging, he can abuse the belonging, he can do whatever he wants with it. But it's the exact opposite. In this particular case, he has all the obligations towards her. And she is the one that has those rights within this ketubah. That's why she doesn't sign it, because she doesn't have those same obligations. And I'll tell you something fascinating. Sexual intimacy within the context of this arrangement is vastly different than before this arrangement, because you can't truly experience oneness unless a man feels that a woman is the extension of himself. Let me give you an example. Ready for this? So my husband and I, let's say I think we gave an example similar to this. I don't remember, but if you go and you rent, do you remember we gave this example? If you rent a home versus if you stay in a hotel room, or if you purchase a home, when you purchase, it becomes an extension of yourself. Can you imagine what it's like for a man to have responsibility, that he knows that it's a lifelong endeavor that he's responsible for? He has to treat her in a very different way, because he knows that if he hurts her, he's going to have to fix it because she is his. So that purchasing, quote unquote, really tells us so much, ladies. It really tells us that there is a notion that oneness cannot exist unless there is some type of responsibility for someone who could be possibly vulnerable in this case. That it flips everything that society wants to do naturally, which is to have women catering towards men's sexual needs. And it says, and the Torah commands and demands for men to do that to women, because that is how we rise to greatness, is to go against our instincts and do that which doesn't always feel good and hot, but is good, which is a deeper sense of pleasure. It's a much deeper sense of pleasure when you are providing someone else with that pleasure. I have to say that this was my portal into Judaism. This was it. This was
And
this was
also,
everything.
it's interesting when you think of the act. Sorry, my mind goes there because maybe I'm a Balchuva, but like when you think of the sexual act, he gets the most pleasure when he's giving to her.
Yeah.
When he's giving to her through the act of the intimacy, he gets the most pleasure. Like you get the most pleasure as you're giving, right? Like it's just
We say that the physical world and the spiritual world are
Mirrors.
mirroring each other, right? With that-
and yeah, and it's interesting because I think the challenge in this generation, which feeds totally into what you're saying, Adina, is that the challenge is that women have so established themselves as I need to be independent and I'm an independent woman and can have my own bank accounts and I don't need men, and what do I need men for? Talk to the hand, but I kind of want him to open the door for me and I love it when he looks after me and it's so cute. He got me roses and oh my gosh, it's so amazing. But I don't need men. No, I don't need men at all. I can do my own thing, and we can if we want to. We can do anything we want. But it's interesting that we're in this conflict between we want the independence, we can do everything. It's kind of like a pushback against men, and yet we love it. There's an internal sense of wanting to be cared for, not because we need it because we're weak, but because there's that flow that happens, that intimacy that happens. And I think for men, then what happens in response to the independent talk to the hand woman, whatever, is that the man can't or doesn't take responsibility, which is what you're saying. That responsibility is what creates that connection. And so men, you find a whole lot of men kind of emasculated, like they don't feel like men and they're kind of like weak-ish. I'm not saying this in general because there's always exceptions, but there's women. The women are strong and independent, and the men, like the women, don't respect the men. And I've seen this so many times. So many of my students tell me they're super accomplished. So I feel like then we end up going in the wrong direction in the search for wanting to be our evolved selves. But there's a sacrifice there with not understanding this exact piece that Adina's talking about, which is, how do we come together? Well, let's say it's a given that we both respect each other and that we both want to be connected, and we both. It's not like men versus women. It's not like women are being. Let's assume women are being oppressed. Let's say we're on the same team and we want to support each other. Like, so in an ideal world, how does that work? And that's what I think Judaism's trying to bring forward, even though there's always problems and faults with every culture and it's not saying Jews are perfect, because they're not. But the ideal in the Jewish pathway, if you aspire to do it the right way, is that we love each other and we respect each other and we want to do good by each other and we want to create that intimacy. So anyway, I just hope that makes sense.
I think this is why women seek relationships, intimate relationships, and this is why women get married in the first place today, because technically they don't need to. No woman needs it today anymore. We have our own independence. And as you know, what you said about the ketubah is 100% true. And another part of it is also that a woman needed that protection years ago, whereas she doesn't need it as much today.
Right.
She's so much more independent today. There's nothing a woman can't do on her own. She used to not be able to have a job and an income. She couldn't vote. She couldn't own property. Today, a woman can even become impregnated without a man. So why do we even have these relationships? And I think really, really that goes into what you were saying now, that we still have, there is that need for that flow, for the natural flow of the way the world was supposed to have been made, where we have this give and take, within this relationship, and we're supposed to be those givers. And it's interesting because intimacy itself is, it could be, it's really neutral. I think just pretty much with everything else in life, as with everything else, most things in life, I think, were created neutral, and we determine whether they're positive or negative based on how we use them, right? So for example, look at, shopping. Is shopping positive or negative? It's neutral. It depends. Are you buying things that are within your budget and things that are healthy for you? And then it's wonderful, but if you abuse the shopping, then it's something negative, right? Internet, fill in the blank. Everything could be positive or negative, how we use it. And the same thing is with sex. It could be the holiest thing, as we just finished saying. If we respect it and we respect intimacy in general, it becomes the holiest thing for us. But if we abuse it, if it's in the wrong time, the wrong place, the wrong person, the wrong way, the wrong mindset, whatever it is, right, then we turn it into something that's negative and we don't get the healthy result that we're looking for from it, right? So now that we covered this area, I think I want to move on a little bit to talk about okay, we spoke about marriage, we spoke about intimacy, we spoke about why people get married, one of the reasons why people get married. I think we have a little bit of an issue today in sustaining the marriages. We know why people want to get married. We want that connection, we want that relationship, we want that companionship. I wonder what the main ingredient is in a marriage for it to sustain itself, for it to be able to maintain. So I would love to hear what you have to say about that. I know that people say the main ingredient is love, the main ingredient is respect, the main ingredient is honesty, the main ingredient is happiness, fill in the blank, but I feel like none of those things are really the bottom line. None of those things to me feel like they're holding down the marriage. There has to be something else that's the main ingredient. I would love to hear what you think.
So interesting, because Jackie, you want to go?
No.
People ask this question all the time, like, what's the main ingredient? What is the biggest secret? And I feel like it's such a algorithmic attitude. Like, there's so many different ingredients that play a role that it's hard to boil it down to, like, what's the foundation of all marriage? We know
I'm a terrible cook.
Yeah. Like, if we think of
talking about ingredients,
if we think oneness is, I think oneness is definitely the ingredient for healthy sexual intimacy. But I can't help but go to my grandparents who lived in that previous generation where it was just so pure. My Bubby and my Zadie met in the DP camp in Austria after the war, both survivors. What do you think their dating experience was like? What do you think their marriage, on what premise did they rest their marriage? Do you know what it was like? My grandfather didn't build any, he had no education, he had no home, he had no clothing, he had no money, he had nothing, he had no family. My grandmother had even less. So how do you think they had this conversation? What did they build it on? You know what it was? My grandfather told her that she was beautiful. And my grandmother said, yeah, okay, so what do you have to offer? He says, I have nothing. I've lost everything. I have nothing to offer you except that I'll take care of you for the rest of my life. And she said, guess what? I have nothing too. So let's build something together. It was the face of that loss where they felt this yearning to build. And the highest birth rate in modern Jewish history is in the DP camps post-war. Wow. And you think it's so counterintuitive. How on earth are you going to support all of these children? And the answer is because they were so desperate to build something. It wasn't just about the kids. They lost so much. They were desperate to take revenge and build. And I really feel that one of the most beautiful ways that you can build a marriage, and it kind of allows all of the, it puts the fights in context, it puts the intimacy in context, it puts aging in context, it puts everything in context where we came together, not just because it feels good to be together. Yes, I love compatibility. It feels good to have someone by your side. But it's really about building something bigger than us. It's about building that Jewish home. And if you're building this little temple where when people walk in and they're like, oh, this is holiness, this is beautiful, I want something like this. If your windows are kind of shining that beautiful light into the world, you're building something bigger. And so you get into a fight and you're like, well, work it out because we're in the process of building something. We're building quote unquote spiritual business. And I really feel it's the only thing that's grounded me. The only thing that's truly grounded me is remembering that I'm building something bigger than just one and one can ever, ever, ever. It's much bigger than two. It's thousands. It's a legacy of Jewish identity and the Jewish nation. It is the foundation of the entire Jewish nation. That's why, Yafa, you said that. You're in the middle of the Kodesh Kodashim, the Holy of Holies. It was the most strange thing. They have both male and female because that is the energy that builds the Jewish nation. And we must keep our minds and keep our focus in the bigger goal as we navigate the day-to-day experiences of relationships that everything is trying to pull us down, but to continue to rise above.
Beautiful. Wow. That is so beautifully
Absolutely.
said. I totally resonate with that, but I could never have put words to that myself, But now you say that, I'm like, oh, that's totally my experience, right? Like totally, especially having come from a background where I didn't have that and I just had relationships and long-term relationships and whatever, versus building, the building bigger than you, which is also a spiritual experience. That's a spiritual experience. It's funny, you know, when I was in my, I'll just because it's just us, like no one's really watching. So when I was in my depths of like despair, being single, when I was like really, I got married really late, guys, like really late. So I remember like being like, how do you find the strength to go on and, you know, whatever. And I called Edith Eger. Do you know who that is? Edith Eger is, yes, I did. She's the most, I read her book. If anyone's never read it, read it. It's called The Choice. It is unbelievable. And Sold is going to start a book club on it after this. So stay tuned because we're going to start a Sold club like very, very soon. And we're going to do book clubs and Netflix clubs and all sorts of cool things. But The Choice, read The Choice. She's a Holocaust survivor. She's like dynamite. And she's like this grandma who is just fiery and passionate about life still. And it's amazing. She's a psychologist. And I read this book crying. Like I just cried for so much of this book. I don't know why. She just spoke to my heart and my soul, and she'll speak to yours. And I called her up. It's going to make me cry. And I called her up and I just started crying to her. I don't know. Oh, yeah, that's it. Oh, wow.
That's a different cover than what I know.
That's a different cover, Michael. But like it's totally, it's the right person. But it's so funny. There's a
I never saw that cover.
I've never seen that cover either. But so she
Like,
talks
if you
about
find it on Amazon, whatever, it might have a different cover, but just know that that's her. Okay.
that is her, Edith Eger, The Choice. And anyway, I spoke to her and I got through to her, and she just treated me like I was a grandchild. Mm-hmm. And she was just like speaking to me, and I just said like, how do you know I'm single? And I've tried everything and whatever. And she just said, find a good guy and cook him a casserole. That was her advice. Find a good guy and like basically give to him, nurture him, like to create that connection.
Create something.
I was just cracking up because she was like, it was like this experience of giving and just that simple wholesomeness of connection, and that's really where the building starts. You know,
I have a relationship with Dr. Eger. I lived near her. She lived in San Diego.
Yes. Yes.
And I lived near her, and I really went out of my way to develop a relationship with her because I said, how can I live in a city with this celebrity and not get to know her? She has so much wisdom and so much. And I went to talk to her one day. It was a Friday morning, and she was the warmest. She held my hand, and she like literally, like you said, Jackie, you felt like you were her granddaughter. Imagine in person. She was so warm. And finally, I said, we were talking for hours. And finally, I said to her, Dr. Eger, it was such a pleasure to meet you, but I have to go home and cook for Shabbat. She said, her eyes lit up. She said, Shabbat, what are you cooking? What are you making? And I told her what's on my menu. She said, oh, I don't even know how many years passed since I tasted Shabbat food. She said, I miss Shabbat food. So I went home and I cooked double, and I brought back food for her. I brought her some of my Shabbat chicken soup and challah, and she loved it. And I started doing that for her, bringing her Shabbat food. She's such a special, because she loved it, and we brought back so many warm memories for her. You know.
Oh wow! So you've got everyone got to read that book. But anyway, that's a little bit. Yes, we should get back to the topic. Sorry, sidetrack. But she was just like that same example of that wholesomeness of the connection. So I love the idea of Malchus of that building bigger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. That's really very beautiful. I love that. Okay, so wait. Okay, now I need to get back on track. Why did you bring up Dr. Eger? Because now I started thinking about all the chicken soup that I made for her. What did you?
I brought her up as just like a grandmother I went to when I was kind of lost and didn't know like how
building, right? Okay,
how do you start building?
Yeah, she was. Yeah, exactly, about building the relationship. So this gets back to our question of what it is. What is that secret ingredient? And Adina, I love what you said about something. There has to be something that's bigger than you out there. And I think that a little bit of what we struggle with today as a society is being very, very self-focused and always wanting to see what's in it for me. What am I going to gain from it? What am I going to get from this? And that's why I think that, in my opinion, I think that the main ingredient in a healthy and strong marriage and a sustainable marriage is commitment. If you are committed to your marriage, then there'll always be a reason to stay. If you're not committed to your marriage, there will always be a reason to leave. There will always be an excuse. There will always be something that's wrong, something that isn't right. But if your marriage or your relationship is your priority, then I'm committed to this thing, and I'm going to make it work, and I'm going to build on this. And we're going to build something big, and we're going to build something strong because I'm committed to this relationship. But the minute you lose that commitment, that's when everything starts falling apart. So as you see over here, the leading cause of divorce in the United States is lack of commitment. And it really, right. And I think we have a hard time committing.
We have a hard time committing to that commitment. I mean, like, committing to the other person in so many different ways. Like, we get distracted for sure. And, like, when we ask our children, like, what do they want to accomplish when they grow up? Very rarely are they going to say, like, they want to have healthy relationships. Often they'll say, like, I want to be someone. Career is like something that and often our relationships are like sacrificed on the altar of career, which is such a shame, because really, that is the number one factor for happiness in life, is the quality of our relationships. It's interesting because they say that the number one cause, or depending on which study you look at, it could be number one or number two, for divorce today is infidelity. And we know we have an over 50% divorce rate, which is pretty astonishing, because if you think about it, I don't think infidelity is the cause for divorce. Infidelity is often the result that two people are not interested or don't understand what it means to be able to be committed. And therefore, at that point, they've lost the value of the relationship and the commitment. Therefore, they turn elsewhere to fill the needs that they've been looking for all along. That
I don't think it happened way before.
Causation versus, correlation.
Yeah, I think it's a symptom that there's a problem in the marriage, that there's a lack of commitment, that there's a lack of empathy, a lack of love, whatever it is. And then infidelity is that symptom. It's not the reason. That's probably why.
Right.
I mean, it's a very sad. It's sad because I see how much potential that there can be for mankind to be able to tap into this deep sense of pleasure and to grow old together. It's like that, because they find something else. That to me is sad. I always put my grandparents in my mind, in terms of, like, just how sometimes the more progressive we become, whether technology takes us away, we like digress and we go backwards in terms of what we're trying to accomplish in the first place.
Let me ask you something. It's true. It's very true what you're saying. And it's so sad. And I wonder if, do you think, either one of you, do you think that the reason for infidelity, and of course there could be so many reasons, but I'm talking, we're speaking generally, and maybe in most cases, do you think that infidelity is coming from the need to have a physical connection with somebody or an emotional connection with somebody? Is a person feeling empty or unfulfilled emotionally?
The research is split, is that often women are more, research is split, that women will unfortunately turn outside of the marriage to be able to fill an emotional need. And men often will turn outside of the marriage for a physical need. This is obviously, I'm overgeneralizing, but research is split in terms of the genders. But what they do find is that men do find that emotional fill, even though what brought them out of the marriage was a physical need. And what women that are motivated to look outside the marriage end up feeling more fulfilled physically outside the marriage, even though what brought them out of the marriage is just so that they can feel valued and loved and beautiful and desired again. And desire is a big, big thing, because when you're inside of marriage, like in that captivity state, it's very challenging to keep desire alive, because often desire is the very ingredient that you need. Forbiddenness is the ingredient that you need for desire. So once you're in the marriage, how are you supposed to feel the desire again. They always say distance is the synapse of desire. We want to be able to create some type of distance, which I don't know if you ever wanted to go in this direction, Yafa, but it's such a beautiful thing that mikvah plays such an important role in creating that synapse of desire. Even within a loving relationship, you can still incorporate passion. That's the big question that all marriage researchers are trying to find out. How do you maintain passionate love after companionate love sets in? And it mystifies everybody. And millions upon millions of dollars are poured into this research because people want to feel that passion again that they first felt when they first met. Every one of us, Jackie, you've been married for a year and change. Yafa, you've been married the longest. I've been married for 14 years. We can all testify the fact that there is a shelf life to that romantic stage, and we all want to bring it back.
Well, it's interesting. I think we have another slide on that. Divorce happens typically, I think, years 7 and 8 or something like that. Yeah. Divorce years 7 and 8 are the most common years for divorce.
Are the most common. This is the typical 7-year itch that has been made popular by Hollywood. The 7-year itch, but it comes from something that might be based on truth. There's something about those years, and then there's also statistics that say that the years between 9 and 14 are the fewest divorces. People kind of fall into a pattern. And then after that, once again, the cycle begins, So it's really interesting. And this is why I think.
I'm wondering if that's to do with children, because when children are old enough that they have to take those children's feelings into account. One reason why people don't get divorced is because there are children that they have to take into account, and they stay in misery for the sake of the kids. I just wonder if that plays a role.
Well, and another thing also is that there are lots of people who, once they have children, this is very, very common. Once they have children, the whole focus of their relationship becomes the children, and they lose focus on the marriage. And then once the children grow up, and once the children are in high school and then beyond high school, and the children, they turn 18 and they leave the home, all of a sudden there are two strangers facing each other, because now that their children don't need them on a day-to-day basis, they don't have anything to talk about, right? There's no relationship left between them anymore. So a lot of times that can also be that. But this is also, I think, why
I want to add something after you finish. Sorry, Yafa.
No, go on. That's fine. I was going to move on a little bit now. So you can add that in.
So I just wanted to add back about the commitment and the lack of commitment, because we talked a lot here about soul being, living from the soul. And we talked about body and soul earlier on. And we talked about dating from soul. And even the dating process in the Jewish view is about dating from your head and then to your heart, right? Dating with basically the higher faculties over the lower faculties. Not that one is right or wrong, but that we want to lead with our higher faculties, which are the intellect, and even above that, the soul. So the idea of commitment, to me at least, is a commitment is a faculty that's higher above how I feel. And I think unless you're nurturing that and cultivating that faculty of what it means to do something because you know it's right, or because you believe it's right, or because just for the sake that you committed to it, over however you're feeling, right? So meaning that you have an inner strength to be able to override your lower self of how you're feeling in order to align with your higher self of whatever it was you committed to, or whatever you know to be right, is like a challenge that we face all the time, especially when our senses and all of us, we're so constantly stimulated with what feels good. Like what feels good in this day and age, and it's always about what feels good. So in that vein, being able to resist what feels good for the sake of something higher, I think, is the challenge. Pardon?
Yes.
To do
what
good
is good. That's it.
So to be good versus to feel good is the exact challenge that faces us when we're looking at intimacy, and that the only real intimacy can be built when we are able to work that muscle. It's just a muscle, I think, that we need to practice and be aware of, rather than, what used to always irk me and freak me out completely was, as again, not being observant, was, we just fell out of love. You hear that a lot, right? We fell out of love, so we've got to just divorce. So what can I do? I'm just a victim. We fell out of love. As opposed to, no, you're not a victim to the feeling. You can nurture, you can cultivate, you can choose to give, you can come from a higher place. But people don't know that. People don't know that. and they really feel like, what can I do? I don't feel like I love this person, so what can I? So that always used to freak me out. Like, how could you ever commit to marriage ever if you're always a victim potentially to falling out of love? And what I love about Judaism is that we can do that manual override. If you don't feel love, override it and choose to give. And there's lots of ways we can talk about another time, but a lot of ways to plug back in. Maybe we should do a workshop on this of how do I like kind of jumpstart, clear, how do I jumpstart the love flow if the love flow is dried up, and that's like a brilliant, important topic. Yeah.
Yeah, women tell me all the time, if I don't know what to do, I don't love my husband anymore, and I always tell them, okay, so go love him. And they're like, no, you don't understand. I don't love him anymore. And I tell them, no, you don't understand. Go love him. Right? Love is something that
feeling or
we cultivate it. We make that decision. It is, as you said, it's something bigger than we are. It's something that we control. It doesn't control us.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Right.
And so based on that, and this whole idea of the commitment and of intimacy being all encompassing. So we understand now, we've been speaking about how intimacy is not something that is just one specific act that happens in a bedroom. It's actually something that's much, much more than that. Even during the physical act of intimacy, there has to be an emotional connection. There has to be a psychological connection. And I think that sometimes there are certain things that might disrupt that. There might be people connecting physically, but they're not connecting emotionally. And at a certain point, the physical connection, I think, is not able to sustain, is not able to last if they're missing that emotional connection. And I'm wondering, what could people do in order to make sure that they have an emotional connection and not just a physical connection? A physical connection will not last. It's external. It needs to be internal. And I was thinking, I would love to hear what you have to say, but I was thinking that we actually have some laws in Judaism that, if you think about it for a minute, you hear these laws, and I'll give you a couple of examples. You think, what does the Torah actually care about when I could be intimate with my husband or not? Some of those laws are, okay, first of all, we know, I'm not talking about family purity. I'm talking about, we have some laws that if the couple is angry and in a fight with each other, they cannot be physically intimate with each other, right? And if a couple is drunk, I don't just mean high, I mean drunk, you don't know who each other are, they can't be physically intimate. And sometimes you think and there's a few more, ideas like this, and you say, why, right? Why? What's the difference? What's the big deal? This is exactly the reason, because if you are with someone who's drunk, or if you are drunk and you're together intimately, you don't even really know who you are. You're not really connecting emotionally. You're just using someone for your own physical needs. There's no actual connection. If you're angry, if you're in a fight with each other, you're not connecting out of love and with real emotional connection, right? You're just, you're using each other in that moment, angry sex or whatever it is that you want to call it, right? There has to be that real, and that's what Jewish law teaches us, that you're not just together to be together physically. You have to really, really connect on a deep emotional level. So having said that, I would love to hear, first of all, if you have anything to add on this, because we're going to have to start wrapping it up now, and we're going to have to talk about the soul challenge for this week. Is there anything any of you want to add in to this idea of emotional connection? If there's anything that you think can also be interfering with that, before we wrap it up.
Jackie?
Yeah. So I just what reminds me of a quote in Koheles, so Ecclesiastes, which is that God made one as well as the other. So you've talked about that before, but that it actually says that as a source in the Torah, that wherever there is the potential for holiness, there is also the potential for the complete opposite, which we call tumah, or degradation, or some sort of version of that. And that's why the most holy act that we could possibly do in the whole world is the act of intimacy. And that is why so many, particularly women, but men also, feel if they've treated themselves as less than that potential, they feel so dirty. They feel so degraded. They feel so, girls talk to me about the hookup culture, and like they kind of feel bound into it, but at the same time feel like horrible the next day, or the one night stand where you feel like, where you've treated yourself less than what you know your potential is. So I feel like that's a powerful idea that you said it's you explained that everything's neutral. But I think if we come even just out of this show with the idea that I can choose, do I want to align myself with the purpose of building and connection and holiness and my potential, or do I want to align myself with disconnection and sort of as degradation, or treating myself on the physical level only, which I know I'm a lot more than that. So then I will feel that sense of I don't know what the word is, but it's just like a cheapness and a degradation. Like it's a horrible feeling when we treat ourselves less than what we know we could be. And I think that we all have free choice around that, and people don't realize that you have free choice. And when you have the courage to step out of the mold that's around you, whether it be peers or society or whatever it is, and you have the courage to treat yourself with the dignity that you truly are, which every single person is as a soul, the whole world then shifts around you. Right? So people's fear is that I'm going to be left alone. I'm going to be on my own. No one's going to love me. But really the opposite happens, where you only attract people to you that respect you for more. And I just want to invite these amazing women who are watching tonight to do that. Like to really just even think about it for a week. Think about it. Like just ponder the fact that you know that you're so much more. You know you're so much more. And you know that you treat yourself less than if you don't refer to yourself that way. So just have the courage, the leap of faith, with everything we're saying tonight, to know that you're not alone and you can choose. And when you make that choice, you will feel $1 million inside, because you know you've treated yourself with that dignity that you really truly are. So, and contact us on the Facebook group, join the Facebook group, tell us about it, or ask about it, or tell us about the difficulties. And it's just all women in there, and we can talk to you. And we would love to hear from you.
Yeah, Jackie, that was really beautiful. I really love that you ended off the session with that. Very, very, very important. You know, we get the experience that we choose. You know, however we want, we get to choose that we're going to elevate this and turn it into something holy and something absolutely beautiful. And then we experience all the goodness that comes with that, and the ultimate pleasure that comes with that. Yeah. So thank you so much for that. And now let's hit everybody with the soul challenge for this week. We spoke about the importance of commitment and how you want to have the ultimate relationships and the greatest levels of pleasure, physically, emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually, all together, right? We need to know that we are committed to making that happen. So for this week, everybody, pick one area of life that you feel needs improvement, and commit to that change. And really, regardless of how you feel, okay? Regardless of how you feel.
That's the key.
You know, that's the key. The key, it's not about how you feel. It's not about what you feel like doing. It's about what the right thing to do is, because that's ultimately how we reach for something that is bigger than us, and how we could create and build and format something that is much, much bigger than we are. And when we live for something that's big, and when we live for something that is purposeful and meaningful and above us, not just about us, that is when we experience true happiness, true pleasure. And I'm talking about long-term pleasure, not just instant gratification, real, deep, internal, lifelong, everlasting pleasure. So thank you all so much for
and the reason we're saying that tonight is because we just talked about tonight how the biggest reason for divorce is because people can't stay committed. They don't know how to commit. They don't know how to stay committed beyond how they feel. And so I think if we practice that muscle, which is a higher level, then we're in good stead to be able to commit and have that building that we've all been talking about.
Practice it on yourself, because the only way to be able to have commitment in a relationship is if you first commit to yourself. You commit to yourself what you deserve. You commit to yourself who you are and who you're becoming. So the first level of commitment is commitment to yourself, and only then can we actually commit successfully to another person.
Before, we only have 1 minute left, but I'd love to add something very quickly, because it's interesting that the challenge was about like committing to something and taking something upon yourself. So one of the things that I took upon myself when I was dating for like what seemed like an eternity and not finding the one that I was going to spend the rest of my life with was I took upon myself to be careful about the films, the movies that I watched. And only years later, I used to like close my eyes. I know this sounds a little juvenile, but it shouldn't be. If sex is something that is sacred, if intimacy is something that we're trying to achieve, not just the cheaper junk food version, so much of the movies that we watch depict that, and it's going to make an impression on us. So I took upon myself to close my eyes, careful as I watched films, not to engage and to. So I really believe the 11th commandment should be thou shalt be careful about what you watch, because it's impossible to engage with this and watch it and drink it in and not expect it to affect us when the time comes when we do have the right person that's by our side and it's going to affect us when we're trying to create that sacredness. So that was my personal challenge that I took upon myself before I got married. And I'm often like,
great.
100%.
Okay, so tell us all about it on the Facebook group. We'd love to hear from you in the Facebook group. Join the small group.
I'll see you all on the Facebook group. I want to hear from you. Everybody remember, on the Facebook group, you have a voice also. You're not just listening to us. We want to hear you on the Facebook group, okay? All right.
Awesome.
Ladies,
thanks, guys. It's been real.
Wonderful. Thank you so
been
much.
Real.
It has been.
Yes, it has been. Have a good night.
You.
Bye.
Bye.